Hey, how are you today? Okay, today we're going to keep on learning about ancient Egypt. We are going to learn about farming and food. So let's take a look. Good. So, why was farming important to the ancient Egyptians? Well, nowadays, whenever you get hungry, you just rush into the kitchen and you can open the fridge or have something to eat. Before, they didn't have supermarkets, so their kitchens were empty. They had to grow their own food. So, whatever you wanted, you needed to do it with your own hands. And where did ancient Egyptians farm? Well, remember that Egypt is a desert. So it is very, very dry. It's very, very hot. And they have a lot of sand. They don't have so much soil available. So they had to grow their own food near the Nile River because that is where the water was, and it was a very important source of water in this hot and dry desert. Let's see. Why was the Nile River a good place to farm? Well, the Nile River had one very special characteristic. It flooded in the same way year after year. So, for example, now we are in August. So, every August, the Nile River will flood. To flood is when the water grows, when it floods. So, every year in August, the water went up to here. This happened in 2020. This will happen in 2021. This also happened in the past, 2019. So every August, the water got up to here. Every January, the water got up to here. Every July, the water got up to here. So they could plan in advance. They could say, okay, which is a good month to plant? Well, of course, they couldn't plant when the water was up to here. They had to wait until the water went down and the soil was ready to plant. Okay, so this was a good characteristic from the Nile River. Well, there were three farming seasons. Akhet, the flooding season, as I said before. Peret, the growing season. This was the season during which the plants would grow. Okay? And Shemu, the harvesting season. To harvest is when you take the food that you planted before. So let's take a look into the first one, Akhet. So, Egyptians kept a record to see how much flooding they expected each year. So, as I said, they knew that in August or in certain month of the year, the water would get up to here, or up to here. So, they knew when was a good time to plant. And what did they do during the flooding season? Well, during this season, they could do some other things. They could start painting, or some of them learned how to read and write, so they could do some other things different than farming. During Peret, it was the growing season. So once the water went down, they had all those nutrients that were available in the soil. So this was a good time to plant. And remember that all the families, all the poor families, worked together during this season. For example, all the boys were the ones in charge of plowing. What is to plow? Well, plowing is when you make a little line in the soil where you can open the soil a little bit, and the soil then would be ready to place the seed inside. Okay, so they could do the plowing in two ways, or by hand with their own hands, or with ox. This is an ox, which we have here. So this job was done by the boys. Then girls would go and plant the seed for the plants to grow. Okay, so what other things did Egyptians do? Well, they also diverted the water from the Nile River. To divert is to change the way. Suppose this is the Nile River and I have got my plantation here on my right. So I would make a water canal so I could get some of that water. They would do this to get some irrigation for the plantation. So this is another good thing Egyptians started doing back in the old days. Okay, and the third season is Shemu. This was the harvesting season. This was the season during which they took all the food they grew. Okay, so for example, if they got grains, they store them here in these large stores. They put them in here. These stores acted as banks. Why? As banks? Yes, as banks. Because they didn't have money. Remember that there was no actual money, no money at all. So in this way, they could get some grains from the store and they could go to a place and exchange it for other goods that they wanted or that they needed. Okay, and what did they grow? Well, ancient Egyptians grew lots of crops, but the most important were these ones, wheat and barley. So, what did they do with the wheat? They ground up the wheat, they make it into powder, and that powder, it was flour. So, what can you do with flour? Well, many things. You can make a cake, you can make bread. They decided to make bread, okay? So, in this way, they turned the wheat into bread. Here we have got the wheat. And the other important crop was barley. What did they do with barley? Well, this might be something surprising, but all Egyptians drank beer. Why did they drink beer? Well, they drank beer because the water from the Nile River was polluted. It was super dirty, so they could not drink from that water. What they could do was turn it into beer. Okay, what else did they grow? Well, ancient Egyptians grew lots of vegetables and fruits. Here we are going to take a look at some of them. So they had melons, plums, grapes, and dates. Have you tried the dates? They are very, very sweet. They also grew onions, leeks, garlic. This garlic was very important for the ancient Egyptian civilization. They used garlic to put it into their food to make it more tasty. They grew radishes and lentils. So, how did they eat? Well, everything depended if you belonged to a rich or poor family. Let's take a look. So, rich families only had 3 meals a day. They had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. On the other hand, poor families, they only ate 2 meals a day, a large breakfast and an early dinner. So they would eat very early in the morning and then late at night, an early dinner. Okay? Then rich families, they ate on tables, on small individual tables. They would eat with their fingers and they would have a washing basin next to the table where they could wash their hands with water. Poor families, they ate on the floor and they also ate with their fingers, but they couldn't wash their hands. Rich families, they ate like a variety of foods. For example, they ate meat, milk, vegetables, fruit, well, bread, of course, everything, and they had at hand, and it was a variety of foods that they could eat. Poor families ate a lot of bread, vegetables, fish, and if they had the chance to eat some meat, they ate meat like duck, for example. Let's see. Okay, so we are going to start with our activity for today. So let's take a look at the little icon we have got here. That icon, I will move myself aside, there. That icon means that you have to write down the answers with pen or pencil. You can print the activity, but then you have to write down the answers with pen or with pencil. Okay? So remember to write down the date and the day number, that is 77. Good. Let's answer these questions. Where did Egyptians farm? So, in which place? Of course, it was in Egypt, but where? In which place? Near? They farmed where? Why did they choose that place? Think about this. Remember that they needed something very important to start planting. Number 2, did they drink water from the Nile River? Remember what we said about drinking water from the Nile River? Good. Number 3, name 2 vegetables and 2 fruits ancient Egyptians ate. That is very, very easy. You can go backwards into the video and check that information back again. How did rich families eat? We talked about that. Did poor families eat with their fingers? Did they wash their hands? Remember that date and past never ever go together. And number 6, you have to make a drawing of the 3 farming seasons showing what happened in each of them. So whenever you're done, you just send us your work and we'll return it with some corrections or comments. Okay, see you around.